What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Toma Todito Boxing Show. And Zurdo Ramirez has suffered the first loss of his career, and it was basically a one-sided affair. Let's talk about Zurdo and Bivol and the card, the amazing card that was. What an amazing event that they put out in Abu Dhabi. An early card at that, which was early Saturday morning. And man, it was the expectation for it. I didn't even put a preview episode on this because I didn't have time, to be honest with you. I didn't have time to get around to it, but I definitely want to do a recap episode because not just the magnitude of this event, but it's a meaningful event. Gilberto Ramirez, Zurdo Ramirez, suffers the first loss of his career. He is now 44-1 with 30 knockouts. And if you look at this fight, the way that I analyze this fight, yes, we got Dmitrii Bivol, right? We got Dmitrii Bivol, who's coming off of that victory over Canelo Alvarez, that shocking victory to a lot of the boxing world. Who is this guy? Where did he come from? Was it a fluke? Was it a robbery? No, it was a really solid performance that Dmitrii Bivol put on in May against Canelo Alvarez. Beat a very good top-level Canelo Alvarez, who has basically reached his ceiling in this stage of his career. And Dmitrii Bivol figured out Canelo Alvarez, took the fight to him, did not run, took the fight to him, and defeated him. He beats Canelo Alvarez by unanimous decision, and he beats Gilberto Ramirez now by unanimous decision. The expectation, the anticipation, if Zurdo could have pulled out this victory, then we would have seen a big showdown between Canelo and Zurdo Ramirez, one that Zurdo's been calling for years and years. That's put to rest now. Saul Alvarez being out after the fight with Bivol with the surgery that he's been long delaying, that's out of the question now. So now, yes, does Dmitrii Bivol take the rematch with Canelo Alvarez, or does he continue to shoot forward towards unifying that division and chasing after Arthur Beterbiev? Beterbiev, of course, is going to be fighting Anthony Yarde in January, I believe, is when their fight's going to happen. And he's the rightful owner of the 3 titles. Bivol has the 1 WBO title. Sorry, the WBA title at 175. And he retains it. And he retains it in fairly easy fashion. Does that mean that Zurdo Ramirez doesn't have pop? Not at all. Zurdo Ramirez has power. Zurdo Ramirez let Bivol feel his power. The interesting thing that I gathered from this, now that I got to see him, yes, I saw Bivol against Joe Smith. I've seen Bivol in the past. But the interesting thing that I gathered from him, even against Craig Richards, I remember that fight, and I've always learned a little something about Bivol, but until he beat Canelo, this is something that I wanted to see if he was going to do again. And it's something that I caught on from the last fight, and he sure as hell did it again. He refuses to give up real estate. He refuses to give up any ground. And if you look at the fight, he would continuously set his foot. And once he anchored his lead foot, he was not moving. His hips were moving, his head was moving, his shoulders were moving, and he's evading punches and evading the attack. And he manages to find an opening while weathering the storm. That's the beauty of his boxing. That's the beauty of what he's able to pull. That's what he did with Canelo. And sure enough, he did it again. And I was curious to see if this is what I was going to see, or if it was just a one-time thing that he did against Canelo because of the fighter that he was facing and the style that Canelo posed. Nope. Zurdo Ramirez, to me, is always stronger when he goes forward. When he's walking his opponent's back, he tends to get even stronger as his opponent's on the back foot and unleashes his power with full strength. He tried, and he would find himself off balance because Dmitrii Bivol refused to give up any ground. He wouldn't walk back. He would stand his ground and evade the punches from the pocket. And it's not like he's willing to weather the storm. He's welcoming the onslaught. And that's where he finds his openings amidst the storm, amidst the onslaught. And he catches his opponents while they're throwing and on the reset. And every time the Zurdo was bringing his arms back after he lunged 3-4 punches to the body or to the head, Dmitrii Bivol was already delivering punches of his own. And it wasn't 1 or 2. It wasn't the traditional 1-2 punch. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 punches in succession while he angles out and gets out of the way. Very, very solid performance by Dmitrii Bivol. And if this performance doesn't raise the level of anticipation for a fight between him and Artur Beterbiev, I don't know what will. This is as high level as it gets. And even Dmitrii Bivol mentioned it in one of the interviews that the money is great, but he's not chasing the money in the rematch against Canelo. He wants to chase legacy, and he wants to go after the fight with Artur Beterbiev. So that's going to be really, really interesting to see. Let's hope it happens, right? We just had a fight fall through between Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, which is one fight that we've been awaiting. The Anthony Joshua Tyson Fury fight fell through. Now we're going to get Chisora and Fury for a third time, whatever you make of that. Maybe we get Joshua and Wilder, but that's not a big fight. I mean, come on. Tyson Fury and Usyk's not happening. Crawford and Spence is not happening. Come on. Let's get Bivol and Beterbiev. That's the next best, biggest fight that we can make right now. So let's see what Beterbiev happens with Beterbiev and Anthony Yarde. If that fight does go through, it looks like it will be going through here early at the beginning, at the turn of the calendar of 2023. Impressive performance by Dmitrii Bivol. I like how he's able to create offense and generate his offense while engaged in full defense. And that's a style that is going to be tough for anybody to contend with because they're never going to be comfortable. We went from Zurdo measuring Bivol to calculating his attack to becoming hesitant to being gun-shy towards the final stretch. He didn't know when to throw. He didn't know what to throw. He didn't know how to throw, how to approach Bivol because Bivol had an answer for him at all times. The other thing is the facial expressions. Very monotone, very robotic in Dmitrii Bivol, where he doesn't show much expression. He doesn't display much frustration. He just stays very concentrated, very calculated. And he's very accurate, very efficient and accurate with his punches is another thing that I like about Dmitrii Bivol. It's very impressive. And for those haters of Dmitrii because he beat Canelo in May and those saying that it was a fluke, that it was, whatever it is, if this fight doesn't change your tune, then go watch something else. Because Dmitrii Bivol, the things that I wanted to see and that I was really interested in seeing, he displayed once again, and he did it amazingly. It was very fascinating to see that this is his style, and I thought it was a one-time thing and he was going to change his style because I didn't really pay attention to it in previous fights that I mentioned against Joe Smith and so forth. Now it makes sense. After paying attention to this, I went back and revisited some of those old fights, and now I'm starting to see the trend where these fighters are actually lunging forward, looking for the fight, hunting after Bivol, and that's where he's the most successful. When they're coming at him, he welcomes it. He's not a fighter that weathers the storm, but rather welcomes the onslaught to find and generate his openings. And that's crazy to me because yes, he puts himself at risk to get injured and damaged. So that's what I'm saying. Does Zurdo not hit hard? Of course he does. And you saw that he was starting to inflict some damage on Bivol, but Bivol welcomes it. He never swayed. He never showed any signs of weakness and continued to stick to his game plan, and he affects it masterfully. Congratulations to Dmitrii Bivol. Let's hope that fight against Beterbiev happens and he remains unblemished, 21-0 with 11 knockouts, and now sits and waits for what Artur Beterbiev will do with Anthony Yarde, or if it's going to be Saul Canelo Alvarez, his next opponent in a rematch fight for 175. So that was really impressive. The other fights that took place on the card, we have Of course, the women's fight, Chantelle Cameron, who now becomes undisputed at 140 pounds. Remember, she ended up getting the WBA, WBO, those organizations who jumped in and threw their belts into the mix. WBC, IBF, and Ring Lineal Championship around Chantelle Cameron's waist as she stepped into the ring, and the WBA, WBO jumped in and they're like, hey, we want to make this a full-on unification, undisputed type title fight. Jessica McCaskill, the undisputed champ at welterweight, coming down, and it made this fight even more of a notable high-stakes type fight. And we had a traditional fight of boxer versus slugger, and the boxer won. Jessica McCaskill, very uneasy on her feet, not very balanced, throwing wide shots, looping shots, leaving the center open, leaving her face exposed for most of the time. She was just interested in landing that power punch, which she found success throughout the fight, but it was not enough to stop a game Chantelle Cameron, who affected her boxing and affected her game plan behind her left jab. And that left jab continued to land perfectly because the center was always open. McCaskill continued to throw looping and wide punches, and the center was fully exposed. Chantelle Cameron focused, sending her punches down range, down center range, and her left jab landed over and over and over and over throughout the night. Boxer versus slugger fight. Chantelle Cameron wins and is the undisputed champ at 140 pounds. The other fight that was of note was Shavkat against Zelfa Barrett, and what a journey it's been for Rakhimov, because we could look back at going back to 2019 when he beat Asinga Fuzile. If you remember, that fight had some controversy because it was very evident that in the corner they gave him some type of smelling salts or something rough, where you saw the effects of Shavkat, his expression that he didn't like what they were putting under his nostrils, and he came back and then knocked out Asinga Fuzile. And that was the title eliminator for this very same title that he is now the owner of. He got the knockout win over Asinga Fuzile and was in line to face Tevin Farmer. A few months later, Farmer ends up losing the title to Jojo Diaz. Then the Jojo Diaz-Shavkat fight happens, and Rakhimov and Jojo Diaz fight to a disputed, controversial draw. The title was in line for Rakhimov to win because Jojo Diaz lost the title on the scale. And that was the very last fight that we saw Jojo Diaz at 130 pounds. In his very next outing, we saw him against Javier Fortuna in his debut at lightweight at 135. Rakhimov was headed after that, coming short, not being able to gain the title there on that title shot. Several months happened. There was an injury that happened where he withdrew because his shot was coming against Kenichi Ogawa for the vacant title at that time, now that Jojo had moved on. Lost it on the scale and moved on. So Shavkat was back on the running for that title, ends up falling out due to injury prior to, in the lead up to his fight against Kenichi Ogawa. Enter Asinga Fuzile to replace Rakhimov, and Ogawa stops, basically beats Asinga Fuzile, and in a great performance for him, and becomes the rightful owner of that long vacant IBF title. Ogawa, on his very next outing, tries to defend that title and retain the title, and gets knocked out viciously by Joe Cordina, the British fighter who has had long issues with injuries with his right hand, that very same hand that knocked out Kenichi Ogawa. Now we were going to have Rakhimov have a shot at Joe Cordina for that very same title that he's been in the running for and chasing for several years now, and Joe Cordina gets injured, falls out. The title becomes up for play, up for grabs, and now we have Rakhimov and Zelfa Barrett fight for this interim version title, and the fight was amazing. It was a back and forth battle. Rakhimov is always going to be fighting forward, hunting his opponents down, landing short punches, but powerful punches at that, and it's impressive to see how Rakhimov hunts his opponents down, so much so that it's a detriment because Zelfa Barrett managed to catch him with an uppercut and drop him. flash knockdown, but dropped him. And you saw Rakhimov shaken. And I think it was a 5th round where he ends up getting dropped. But he recovered. He recovered, went after Zelfa Barrett. Zelfa Barrett complained numerous times throughout the fight that he was getting hit low. And Rakhimov complained that it was Rakhimov complaining that Zelfa Barrett was hitting him low numerous times throughout the fight. The referee didn't do much about it. The fight continued. Rakhimov continues to go after his opponents, and that onslaught, that pressure, that constant overwhelming pressure that he puts on his opponents eventually was too much for Zelfa Barrett to withstand, and he began to cave in. You even saw Zelfa Barrett's right leg, I believe, giving him problems, and eventually he ends up getting dropped and stopped. Rakhimov has that IBF title that he's been chasing for since 2019 around his waist now, and he's the IBF World Super Featherweight Champion. We'll see what happens with Joe Cordina when he comes back, and then we'll see that fight, which has all the makings to be an amazing, amazing, amazing fight, Joe Cordina against Rakhimov, because those are two stand and bang, rock'em sock'em type fighters with power. They both possess a lot of power, and it's a fight that I'll be right there willing to watch and waiting for it to happen and unfold if and when it does come to fruition. So that's it. That's what happened. Zurdo Ramirez gets the first blemish of his career. We could put aside all the arguments of Zurdo and Canelo happening now, because most likely that just lost its luster. So Dmitrii Bivol on top of the world with 2 back-to-back victories over really, really, really good fighters, really notable names. One in Canelo Alvarez, who was arguably the king of boxing right now, at least by Gates, and Zurdo Ramirez, who was the next in line to challenge. He was supposed to be the one to solve the puzzle of Dmitrii Bivol and beat him and get into a big showdown with Canelo Alvarez and all these plans. Well, everything's been derailed now. Dmitrii Bivol, consistent as ever, and shows that he is as high level as it comes right now. So I leave you guys with that amazing card from Abu Dhabi, amazing weekend, and I will talk to you all soon. Stay tuned. And in a few days' time, we have Janibek coming up, and he's going to be defending, now that he's a full champ, at 160 pounds, and then Seniesa Estrada on that undercard, where she is now going to be making her top-ranked debut now that she had a falling out with Golden Boy, and Seniesa Estrada is going to be making her debut for top rank. She'll be on that card as well, and I think that's a Las Vegas card. So I leave you guys with that. Thank you guys for the continued support, for the continued love, the downloads. Continue to comment, continue to follow me on Instagram, engage with me on Twitter, and I'll be talking to you all soon. Take care of yourselves. Salud. Good night.